My name is Sean McLean. I'm a senior consultant here with Future Point of View. Been working with the company for a couple of years now, and my main role is talking exactly about what we're talking about today, helping businesses adopt new technology, especially focusing on AI and AI infrastructure. A lot of what I do is more focused on industries that are service-based, but I also work with a lot of product and tech-based businesses as well. So this is a really fun topic. There's a lot of things hitting, as you guys all know, every day, every week. So we're going to dive into it. And please feel free to let me know in the chat anything that you have questions on, any topics or other aspects that you need a little bit more alliteration on. I will be monitoring it and we'll keep things going. So to start us off, welcome to the AI Navigator Architecture and Orchestration event this month. This is our update focused on AI infrastructure and turning into the intelligence layer. So you're going to see a lot of topics that are really critical, and a lot of it is going to focus heavily on this slide that FPOV has spent a lot of time and effort organizing a roadmap focused on the journey. And a lot of it we used to call digital transformation. Now we're calling it more of the AI Navigator program. It is a framework that takes you from these dots in the black and being able to go all the way up to the right where everything is nice and purple dots, going from developing your AI leadership to then focusing into this blue area, which we're going to be talking a lot about today, which is the AI Accelerator Hub. Now, in this slide, you will see a whole lot of milestones, and FPOV is slated to do in reaching out for assistance along your AI development journey. Please hit us up. We are great to talk to about all these types of things, and you'll have direct access to all of our consultants, including myself, when you do that. So today, as you see, right when the blue dots start hitting on this slide, we're talking about the beginning of that strategy around AI architecture. And as we drop down into the Accelerator Hub, you see a lot of the actions that we're doing every day and every week with our clients right now, including use case analysis, proof of concept, developing that minimal viable product, and then bringing it out so that we can start utilizing what's called the intelligence layer, and then eventually getting into that organizational mind / hive mind approach that Scott's been talking about for years, if not decades. So this is just another way of looking at that journey, and I really encourage you to reach out if you need that help. Now, today we're going to start off talking about the complexity in this architecture puzzle. Again, there is no true single way to be able to develop your AI architecture. There's a lot of ways. We're going to talk about best practices here today, but in the legacy world, there was a lot of different ways to build out your own servers, own data centers, leverage other data centers. When the cloud became very viable and the hyperscalers like AWS, Microsoft, and Google all started leasing their compute and their server power back to us on the business side, we had all this new optionality. But now we're expanding those use cases. AI has really forced our digital inventories to grow, and that has started to open up another idea of where do we connect? How do we interface with all that core data and intelligence and all these assets across our business? We're going to talk about this deeply today because that is an orchestration that is needed to move between all of those pieces. So it really is important that we do talk about the puzzle and the fabric inside of this. There's a lot of different terminology that comes into play, but the goal is to really get us into this type of mindset that we are going to be a digital centaur and be able to work inside of this technology, not just side by side, but we are actually embedded inside of it with that intelligence layer. So again, this is a big FPOV trend that you've heard over many years to be able to enhance that ability to be a digital centaur and also work within all of these different pieces of the stack. So again, let's center big picture on down. You have to have governance and infrastructure at your root layer. Think about it like you're building a house. You have to have that foundation first. And so you can think about the infrastructure as being your utilities, your power, your water, all of the good stuff you need to continue to build a properly funded business. That governance layer is also side by side extremely important. And you have to really think about audit logging and all of the regulations and compliance needed so that you don't get into a trouble state when you are building this full picture of everything going on. Now, the data layer can be considered multiple things. It's not intelligence when we talk about data. It is a fluid asset. And that's something that's terminology that you really do need to understand because data can be very raw. And raw data is not always helpful for us. It's very similar if you just tossed a whole bunch of data into an Excel file and then looked at it just raw and you're like, I don't even know what these numbers mean. You need to have something that can actually help you make intelligent decisions. And so that's the difference between when we go up using tools like the software layer and then into the intelligence layer, which is our decision making, thinking ability to actually leverage the architecture that we're doing. And then again, the goal of moving all of these layers up into our ability to then say, hey, either hands on keyboard or through voice interaction, I can now have everything that I need to be able to make smart business decisions and be able to actually enhance every process and procedure that I do in my whole business. So it's an incredibly important aspect to focus on this new technology stack, vision and build it. And it has to be an iterative process. It's not going to happen overnight because you have so many different decisions to make. So when we talk about gaining those layers, there's a lot of deep underneath foundations that you can actually start working with. So when we start again at the security, privacy, governance layer, you have to look at where does your business operate, what actual, regs and compliance pieces are going to be focusing on, and then how does that affect your data? If you have businesses in Europe, you have different aspects of compliance you have to worry about than businesses in California and the States. If you actually have to then bring that down into your platform stack, maybe you have sprawl right now. You have a ton of different silos of data. How can you start to consolidate, or how can you actually bring it up so that you're not worried so much about legacy architecture and now working on new things? With large enterprise businesses, that can take many years to actually get rid of that sprawl and get out of like an on-prem, non-integration friendly architecture. But you have to start somewhere. So this is where you can actually take your data, start that monitoring, and again, always look at things like data loss prevention and audit logging of your utilities and aspects in the database so that you can always go look back as we want to look forward, but look back for security reasons. So with that said, you should now have on your roadmap an internal, think of it as like your company's digital layer, which can be a wrapper or it can be all in on Claude or ChatGPT or some type of aspect to make that intelligence layer accessible. But it is going to be your internal focused area. And that can be something that sits in a messaging platform like Slack or Teams or just on a web interface. But you have to be able to have that as one of your AI tools. Then you have to be able to embed that into the software layer. And now, especially if you're following the news today, there's more and more multi-agent platforms coming around. Claude just announced managed layers of agents yesterday, and then also announced that Claude Cowork is now enterprise ready, and they are providing the proper governance tools because it's on general release now and out of research preview. So the vendors are moving at lightning speed, and it is very daunting to keep a handle on everything that is in there. But most of us have this bottom tool already encountered, especially if you're on this call. You probably have some level of personal AI use. Now it's talking about getting this into a scaling mindset and how you can actually do it from a business perspective. So there's really three phases that we're going to talk about today in moving to an infrastructure and AI design methodology. And the first one is really looking at the platform. So for all the tech people here in the audience, you definitely have to have this. And this is a more traditional mindset. that you're going to be able to look at what's available. And a lot of companies will start on the hyperscaler level. So if you have Microsoft as your core vendor or AWS or Google, you're going to start there and then start thinking about how you can build around. If you're multi vendor, which also happens a lot in enterprise space, so that you hedge your bets, you're going to think about how you can connect everything. The phase two is that connection layer because you're going to have to do that even if you are traditionally a single shop. Like a lot of major businesses have built a lot of what they do on a Microsoft hybrid environment, or now maybe gone purely into Azure and Entra ID and all those other things that are awesome. And you can build everything around that. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to integrate with Salesforce for CRM and operational ERPs, NetSuite for accounting, et cetera. You have to think of all of that plumbing that is going to happen to be able to bring everything together. And then that leads to the layer of orchestration that has happened with all of the agents that are being built. We're going to talk deeply about that at the end before we finish up here and get you back to your day today. So, kicking us off on this construction layer on the platforms of phase one, you really do want to think about all of the classic infrastructure, the data, the software. It's really, doing that inventory. Think about it in a process perspective about what the current state of your business is. You always have to start with where you're at before you can start moving forward, unless you're a pure startup, right? If you're a pure startup, you can go and really make quick work because you don't have any technical debt. But you do have to think about that before you start implementing a vision of that change. So the architecture in this high level is really going to be important when you do start thinking about the intelligence layer. Now, like I mentioned, each major vendor stack does have this intelligence layer already available for you, but there's a lot of ways that you can get access to it. And that's the real critical aspect. So when you do have that vision built, say it's Microsoft, and you start looking at what they're doing on the Foundry IQ side. So they have Foundry IQ, they have Fabric IQ, they have all these different layers of the intelligence that can bring everything together. Same with Amazon, same with Google, but everything also has to have that human element so that you're really working. Because as we all know, if you don't have a vision of your true vendor stack, it's going to look like this. You're going to have a network map with a gazillion vendors on it. And a lot of tech companies, this is how they do start off, probably even a lot of other types of industries too. But you have a lot of names and a lot of different integrations, a lot of different pieces to this puzzle. This becomes incredibly complex to deal with and manage. And this is the burden of most technology departments in large businesses, where you've now built all of this sprawl, and some things may be used heavily, mission critical, and some things may not. But you really do have to touch everything to understand what can we start to clean up, what can we start to consolidate, and what can we aggregate. Because the truth is that a lot of these tools are going to be in the background, and even the client slash stakeholder facing platforms can start to be minimized as you build that intelligence layer. Because the goal of AI architecture eventually, with proper orchestration, as a reminder, is to really get rid of awareness of all of these different names on this sheet and get it down to essentially one type of interface to manage them all. And that can be difficult to comprehend. And so if you do have questions about that type of stuff, enter it in the chat. We'd love to be able to see what you're thinking about, like, how do you get rid of that sprawl? But you have to start working on it immediately first and get that buy-in from your executive team, not just the sequester technology team, because this is not truly just a technology architecture discussion. This is actually a full business change slash upgrade proposition that everybody that is a major part of the business should be a part of. And that's why at FPOB, we usually do workshops that include looking 10 years out, 20 years out, so that the leadership group can start to build that vision and then be able to tie it together. So again, all of these components are important. There's not really a linear way to be able to look at what needs to happen to be able to develop your architecture, but you do have to have every one of these boxes checked to be able to move into the blueprint of the intelligence layer. So when you do think about from the bottom up, the governance again, and the model and delivery system and the cloud AI providers, again, that can usually mean the hyperscalers, that can mean, buying tools like Claude and ChatGPT and their APIs through Microsoft and through Google, because there's always going to be that extra tertiary layer that you can actually buy and purchase things through, especially if you're only building wrappers versus using the actual like chat tools. So you have to do a lot of thought process that ties with the budget, that ties with the actual platforms that are available, and also have the mindset that some of this stuff is really a coin flip. If everything that is great right now is going to be great in 12 to 18 months. What history has told us is that it's going to change again heavily in 12 to 18 months because it's already changed heavily in the last 12 to 18 months. And so you don't necessarily want to completely get in bed with one of these vendors and say, we're all in with you and we're going to sign a 5-year deal. That isn't really what we tell even our biggest businesses. Now, you are going to be able to hedge your bets by making some reservations on compute, and that's a big opportunity to discuss. But you really do have to think about where the actual value is going to be between now and the future and how it can scale with you, that aligns with your business goals. And so then that's, again, not a technology decision. That is a pure business decision that you have to think about. But when you are going all the way up through your data architecture, your AI architecture, and then what is that hybrid cloud to on-prem and device delivery architecture, that becomes a very important business decision. We have clients that are making the decision already to say we can save money if we actually buy NVIDIA types of chips and build it in our servers and run those locally and bring all that compute to ourselves because we can own that and then we can control it. Whereas others are absolutely not. We are going to continue to buy, the H200, H100 access in Azure and AWS and then scale that methodology. Neither are wrong and neither are 100% correct. Those strategies are very subjective to what you feel is the proper use for your business right now. And you can always inject and move that as things are moving forward because we know that the data centers are going to continue to be in high demand. We know that the pricing is going to continue to be quite diverse. So you're going to have to stay on top of that. And that's another aspect of governance is that it's not just data and security and audit logging style governance and permission style governance, but it's also cost governance that has to be a big part of this to get to that blueprint of the intelligence layer. So as we move forward through the architecture discussion, really want to make sure that you also are thinking about this concept of single pane of glass. Your company should make it as simple and as easy as possible to access the intelligence layer. And that means that a lot of people from the CEO and the C-suite all the way down to business analysts that are working in this every day, you really should not be thinking about all the complexity to each of those different roles right now. You should really try to make this as simple and unified as possible because as you continue to build out your back-end governance and how everybody, all the usage is monitored and how you're going to be able to continue to control those costs, that simplification is going to help guide you. So you want to have a vision of that to make it transparent and make it usable because a lot of businesses are already making that very clear. There are huge accounting firms in the big four that are already saying that if we have any partners that are not willing to use these tools, they're going to be out of here. And we also have big news in professional services space where if you haven't seen the news, there was a big kerfuffle where KPMG asked for a discount because they knew that their auditor, Grant Thornton, this is all in Europe, was actually saying, oh, well, we're using AI tools and we know you're using AI tools to perform our audit. So we want a discount and we want basically a showcase that you're willing to work with us. So Grant Thornton said, okay, we'll give you a discount. We'll make things, more amenable. So we have a good relationship. But that changed the whole idea of what's the value of using AI if they're not getting faster turnaround time, better deliverables, higher quality of service, more human interaction into the audit process. That should drive the value, which should drive the cost. And this is, again, part of that simplification because you have to have this vision in your mindset that we are actually transforming how our organization works, not just what we're doing to do work, but the architecture discussion is going to drive that value proposition. And so when you do have that single pane of glass, that also means that you're not married to any particular model. A year or two ago, a lot of businesses were focusing on OpenAI's API, and they felt like that was never going to change. Now, a lot of businesses are moving to Claude's API, and more are also interested in some of these closed and open source cheaper models. Google just released Gemma, and Microsoft just released another closed small language model. There's a lot of opportunities to orchestrate that level of AI model access into your single pane of glass. But you also have to think about where are the internal systems in all of this. A lot of companies will say, hey, we're going to connect to this awesome, custom agent for you, and it's going to be your company's GPT, and then it's not connected to anything on the business or intelligence layer. And it's basically just doesn't even know, how many employees do we have and all this things. It's not connected to the HRIS. It's not connected to your accounting system. How is that going to help you in the overall architecture? You have to build all of this centralized right now, and you can't just start sporadically. Like you can't start at the end and then go backwards. You have to build it into that mindset. Um, got a couple questions. Yeah, it's definitely a good opportunity to come up with a suite of tools. I mean, right now, nobody has truly answered a lot of the architectural discussions that we're talking about, but, and a big but, there are more and more features that are coming out around this every day. Like I mentioned, Anthropic is really trying to become the enterprise choice in this matter, especially on the agent side. They are not solving the intelligence layer side. And there are a lot of other, we'll call them more enterprise focused on the tech businesses that are trying to steal this type of market share away from the hyperscaler. So it is a big opportunity right now. That's a good assessment. And just like I mentioned, Claude has now dropped their multi-agent managed platform. A lot of other multi-agent platforms are evolving, and every day you're going to see more and more about this. What does it mean that I can create in Claude Cowork or Claude Code all of these agents that can be fully autonomous if I want to? Or do I want to stick with a single agent that I can control tighter? There's a lot of pieces to be able to understand how you can deliver this to your business. And that's the really crux of it, is that you do have to think about all of that at the beginning when you're building everything out. Now, we also want to talk a little bit about how these categories are evolving, because a lot of folks still have a mindset where I need a chatbot for good access to information. Maybe it's focused on HR, maybe it's focused on IT help. Generative AI is just one aspect around that. But also, when you do move a little bit further down the road, you have the embedded tools that could be right inside of your core accounting, sales, operational applications, as well as task-based agents, which is becoming a little bit more of the flavor of the day, where you can actually have agents spawn agents to be able to handle multiple tasks. Book me a flight, find me the best spot to build my new corporate headquarters, build out a whole agenda for our conference coming up. All of these things can be visualized with more and more tools that are doing it, and enhance that capability of what we're talking about in the actual like Kindred, a companion AI, all the way up to actually using it heavily. So the other side of the coin that I've hinted at in this talk, but haven't really hit totally yet, is the risks, are the risks. And when you do have a lot of architecture moves, the number one risk right off the bat that I have mentioned is you have the risk of not doing anything and then falling behind your competitors. That's the one I usually have to call out first and foremost. But you also have risks around costs. So right off the bat, I did mention that if you don't have that governance controls and essentially like caps in place, and every major model maker, including Claude Enterprise, ChatGPT Enterprise, Google Enterprise, they do have that. And I just onboarded a client into Claude Enterprise yesterday, and their immediate first steps are security governance and cost governance. And they really do tell you you need to do this first before you bring on any of your core users. So make sure you dial that in. So that's obviously number one as far as the risk. The other big risk is looking at the cost of change. And no business is going to get away from this risk because, like I mentioned, in 12 months, there might be a completely new competitor. There might be all these other options. Like when OpenClaw first popped, a lot of businesses in the enterprise space just went crazy about it. Like, oh my God, this is amazing. All the costs are, segregated. I can run it off of local architecture. This is where it's all going to happen. And NVIDIA started also popping at their conference that we're going to be able to have this, Nemo Claw, and it's going to be secure, and businesses are going to be able to distribute that. So everybody has their own Claw architecture. And that's still moving, but that might not be the actual full platform change that you want to take if you're focusing on full centralization. And that's where Claude and all these other vendors immediately responded to it, said, oh, you want to have remote controlled agents? Yeah, we'll give you that too. So they released a remote control access to Claude Code, and now they have the same type of capability flowing to Claude Cowork and also the custom-based agents you can have. That is really the quick nature of this. And a lot of this has happened in the last month, by the way. So most of these things are still new and moving at rocket speed. But then you also have the question that always is going to pervade. Is this private? Is our cybersecurity compliance going to pass this? Is our SOC 2 audit going to be at risk if we adopt this technology? And the answer is maybe. It definitely could be, because there's so many pieces that are tied to that. So you have to be step by step with your risk management team and your cybersecurity team in all of these forays. And that doesn't mean that they're just going to slap your hand and say, you can't do this. They're going to basically try to work with you to enable these tools as helpfully as they can, by also saying, well, this one's not ready. And for a lot of us, that was the easy answer for anything that's still in research preview or still in beta or alpha mode, right? This is okay for testing. It's not okay for general use or definitely business or enterprise use, but we can test it and we can be ready when it comes out. Just like today, when Claude Cowork comes out of research preview and it's now available in enterprise friendly use, the companies that have been using it are now ready, and they also can make a lot of more enhancements because they're already on that platform. So the question really is going to be, are you going to be ready by having that back end level that we're getting into talking? And then the other aspect that's really important, to the final aspects, is that when you do have an innovation program, and we really encourage having innovation programs at your businesses, having events like hackathons and rewarding people for creative uses, that is an excellent opportunity to actually drive these initiatives without being super concerned about, waiting for somebody in your network to do it first, and then you follow the leader or a competitor to just blow the doors off of a new innovation, and then you say, well, now we need to do it because our competitors are doing it. You can be the first leader when you have this innovation approach, but there's a lot of risks also with doing citizen style data that includes shadow AI, shadow technology. And when you try to balance those risks with the rewards, the risks tend to be a lot higher in this space right now because you definitely have a lot of folks that are not always thinking about the corporate mindset and the corporate risk profile if they can build something that can actually, you know, go and do autonomous work or do that person's work for them so that they don't have to do it and then they can maybe go do other things that they want to do, including potentially watching movies or other aspects. So you really do want to think about those levels of control that are part of that risk factor, and then talk about the actual, competitive analysis. You can build competitor watchdogs as agents to be able to look at that and also understand what type of skill developments your actual business are not taking advantage of. And at this point, every business should have a learning management console that is AI focused. If you're still worried about learning and how to use software, unfortunately, that's just not enough anymore. You really do have to go above and beyond those manual tasks of like how to use things like Excel when now you can actually just plug an agent into Excel and it can do it for you, right? And you can still learn how to do it. It's not saying that actually learning the core tools are not important, but it's just part of the puzzle again. Like go back to that puzzle slide. So we do always want to take the risks into account, but you have to definitely keep focusing on the rewards as well. And as we move into step two, outside of kind of like the platform and tech side, you have to also really think deeply about what is this interaction, the actual capabilities and handling the different transactions and being able to get into this mindset of intelligent automation. This is where the robotic process automation world really kind of opened up a lot of technical and business analytic departments going back, even 10, 15 years. And it was very limiting because you couldn't have a ton of smart process automation tools. And when a software company would make a change to their website or other types of platforms, everything would break. And then the end users and your team users were unhappy, and so it was a very not inconsistent approach to doing business processes. Now you have much more ammo to be able to build very effective layers of interaction between all of your business processes. And for a lot of businesses, that's also allowing us to remove that bloat, that tech bloat. And a lot of it is also changing the way we look at software in itself because you can have proper integration with tools like a CRM. And I work with a lot of, again, professional folks that have big investments into CRMs like Salesforce and HubSpot. And all of those tools are great when they're being used fully by power users. And in a lot of organizations, even enterprise, those power users might be 1% of your business, but you're still paying for the licenses for everybody. So you can change that with this type of integration layer. And if you can give the CEO of a business or a partner in a big law firm that chat access into the back end of a software like a CRM and says, hey, I just had a meeting with so and so, here's the details, boom, activity completely stored into the CRM successfully. I've now added to the intelligence layer through an integration through chat. Even better is when you have a meeting like we're doing all day long and you're on a Zoom interface like right now, and everything, every piece of intelligence and every slide that comes up in this meeting is now digested automatically and it hands off into a workflow, and that is smartly routed into the CRM or the project management tool for action items or right into that intelligence layer. So having the plumbing and the integration be properly set up again is a big part of phase one and phase two of making sure that this is all going to be properly set up. But the big kahuna, and this is really where we want to start getting into the meat of this talk, is when AI orchestration can actually intersect with your architectural vision and design, this is when everything starts to make sense, especially for those larger businesses. Smaller businesses can tackle this pretty early on a simplistic basis, but when you do have an orchestration mindset, you're going to start understanding how all of this is going to be working together. So we have a quick little analogy that helps put us through. So how do think about how an org chart and all the titles on that org chart can be constantly moved around because you're actually building a methodology and a framework so that knowledge and information can be shared fluidly across different departments. And even in many cases, you could have a like a CIO at the top and then a CTO is either next to that person on the org chart or part of the technology function of a business. And everybody underneath that org chart might be focused on dev work, innovation, cybersecurity, et cetera. The way that you put that framework together is extremely important on how accountability works, how the ACLs and permissions work, and especially how the actual agentic design can flow when you start thinking about, well, this group has access to this knowledge, and I want to make sure that I don't have to keep reproducing agents across all these different layers just because of different access issues or different communication channels. You want to be able to make this as harmonious as possible. And so you're going to start detecting quite a bit of music and other types of mesh orchestration as we go through the rest of this deck. And yes, that's a great point, John. The org chart does need to flex, and it should be flexing in all organizations right now. So thanks for the comments. So when we do think about this, and if anybody on here is infrastructure focused, a lot of this also is in tune with the Kubernetes approach and containerization of infrastructure. You need to have a similar mindset of orchestration when you're thinking about AI infrastructure as well, because there is a method to how you place the containers. Think of it again as an org chart of agents across your organization. So this digital workforce is going to support the human workforce and also have a big focus on not just giving you an agent and you an agent like an Oprah, show. It's like you get a car, you get a car. No, no, no. We want to make sure that the agents are smartly deployed, and in some cases start with one, again, that single pane of glass for your organization so that it can do multiple things, and then start to actually spawn the different ones without having sprawl, because sprawl equals waste, equals cost, and that is something that is chaotic and we don't want to have happen again. That's part of the risk factor that you want to avoid. So really start looking at the vendors that are available to you and that you trust in these different spaces around agent construction platforms. And again, there's nothing that's just running out ahead of others right now. There's a lot of options in the space. So you do need to form, just like you would with any vendor evaluation project, a requirements matrix. You need to weight the risks, weight the pros, weight with the need to haves versus the must haves versus the nice to haves. All of those things are extremely important when you evaluate these types of orchestration platforms, because agents are so much more than just what you think about when you actually create like one that's sitting on your own computer, right? It's if it's on your own computer, you have a natural benchmark of your processor, your hard drive, and everything that is accessing it. When Claude Cowork first came out, you could just put it right on and access a folder on your machine. But then people started to understand that that can also start bridging the gap into other cloud connected pieces. So you do have to think about this now in a much more bigger scale, especially when you're talking about that inventory of the agents and who's going to be owning them. Again, go back to the beginning of the year, we talked heavily about, and Jensen from NVIDIA talked heavily about the fact that technology departments should not be the ones singly owning agent development. It's probably a people ops issue because these are digital workers that are supporting the human workforce. And that also talks about the sprawl across the finance world, the actual, sales and marketing world. There's a lot of different pieces that you have to talk when you're talking about oversight. And especially when we go to the permissions, that agent access into the intelligence layer has to be part of the orchestration layer. You have to think about what it has access to, because the worst thing you can do, especially in that architecture discussion, is say, we are going to democratize this data and this intelligence layer. We're going to make sure that everybody has access to it, from the person that starts tomorrow on the startup, intern level, all the way up to the C-suite. And that is nice to think about in a vacuum. But when you do start really thinking about it from a true business opportunity, it's just not going to play, because you do have very sensitive data, very client-centric information that is not going to be able to think about HR, think about finance. You just need to be able to have that tied specifically to your groups, and also have data loss prevention and other tools that are constantly monitoring it so that things do not get leaked out. And that's the toughest part about this agent orchestration layer, is how do you do this when a lot of us have never deployed it perfectly? But that's where aligning yourself with the proper vendors and going through that structure. Like, there are learning tools out there on the Microsoft, Amazon, and Google stack already, where you can answer all those questions, and you just have to start with what's going to work best for you. There's a lot of options. Now, the organizational mind, you've heard it a bunch from Scott. This is a representation of that intelligence layer. This is a representation of that sci-fi aspect of the hive mind, when you see all these robots in sci-fi movies that can immediately communicate with each other without talking, right? We have to have that same mindset, because you can't just start there. You have to start somewhere first so that you can basically bring it all together. And that Daily Stoic quote is excellent as well. But as we're developing this organizational mind, this intelligence layer, there are so many key aspects. And as AGI and we get closer to AGI, there's going to be different tiers of AGI. There's going to be large language models. There's going to be small language models. There's going to be agents everywhere. There's going to be all these different co-pilots, basically different types of brains inside of that organizational mind, that you have to be able to inventory and categorize and be able to continue to work with it. Because when things do come to that full fruition, that's where you have the thinking architecture that you want to have happen. So when we go back to orchestrating this, you can think about it like that is your synthetic mind. That is where you're going for your whole business, but also for every worker that is on the human side of it. So this is going to be the kind of full workup of this whole mindset, and it's going to have a couple layers here. So stay with me, and we'll follow it through. And yep, I think we got some really good comments. The biggest issue that companies believe AI is an issue solve as opposed to solution neighbor for business problems. Yes, exactly. That is a gigantic issue, and especially for businesses that just hand it off to the traditional IT or technology department, this is not going to work. You have to have again, the end in mind before you start, so that you can focus on everybody's big picture ideas around this. And that's why handling it through future ready workshops is such a great tool that we love to use. So I'm going to take you through this slide and in detail. And again, some of this is going to be a little bit of a repeat, so that we really hammer home this idea that at the base, at the foundation, you still have this infrastructure layer. You have to have infrastructure set up. And that means either your primary compute vendors, internal compute, or a hybrid of them. You have to decide on what is your power plant of compute for your organization. Then you have the software layer. These are your tools. This is the digital engines of how work is done now. But you're going to be adding in the aspect of managing assets between these layers. So between infrastructure and software, there is raw data. So when we talk about data, That is just what it is. It's think of it as a data set, a number, an actual field level piece of data. That's what we're talking about as a defined asset. But the top layer that we really want to get to is the intelligence layer. And the intelligence layer is not directly harnessing data. And harness is a very key tool term here. And this is also what a lot of the vendors are going to be used. Harness is the underlying fabric between all these layers. And that intelligence layer is for making business decisions, for building automations, for building agents. You need to harness that piece of that layer because that is using your knowledge inventory. That is a very fluid asset. It is constantly changing. That is doing calculations of data. That is building dashboards around data. That is building automations around data. All those different pieces are part of the knowledge inventory. So the embedded side is really important to understand too, because in these lower layers on the foundation, you are going to have embedded brains, embedded pieces that make it. But on the intelligence layer, it's many. We're talking multiple, like think about that side with all the AGIs and everything. You're going to have multiple agents, you're going to have multiple humans all working symbiotically. And when we actually bring the software layer to the data layer, that becomes a controller. That's basically bringing in, again, that CRM or accounting data into a platform that can actually start transforming it to be usable. But again, like I mentioned with the partner or the CEO that doesn't want to go into a CRM to use it, you have to have that knowledge layer built in so that it can actually get into the transformation of it. So the infrastructure layer powers both of those foundational layers, but the compute from that infrastructure layer is really what's going to give the intelligence layer the true power that it needs to make things happen. The structured and unstructured data is going to flow up to the knowledge and intelligence layer, but the actual people and agents that are working with it are going to interact with the data layer from a more direct downstream effect because they're going to be passing in changes, and most of them are going to be agents in the new and now future. So think about that example again of I have a CRM, I barely use it, I spend a ton of money, but I really want to be able to transition what I have in the CRM to the intelligence layer so it can be automated, it can make my life easier, and I don't have to spend a bunch of time pecking around and finding things. That is what we're talking about when we have the digital capabilities transferred from the software layer to the intelligence layer, because this is where business is now starting to work. This is where you can do analytics and you can be conversational intelligence with the software because the software layer is already doing a lot of that work inside with the data. So you really have to think about all this different transition of these different layers and what can happen because when it comes down to it, you are thinking about your full people and everybody is going to stop interacting with software. They're going to stop really thinking about infrastructure because that is going to be the engine that technology and the qualified engineers keep up with the scaling of the intelligence layer. But eventually, all people are going to just focus on interacting with the intelligence layer only. That is the future of AI architecture, is that through a chat or through an agent type of system, natural language, everybody who works is going to be able to do that, from creating tax returns to doing building schematics to all of this critical core work is going to be done through that intelligence layer. And that's why you have to build all those underpinning and scaffolding to make it work. So the AI risk control has to go across the whole enterprise with that mindset that eventually it's all going to be centralized in the intelligence layer, and the AI automation that is going to be able to happen is going to be incredible because the offset here is that the damage to organization, if anything fails, is also incredibly damaging. I mean, that is going to be the biggest issue. If you can't develop trust on your intelligence layer, then you have incredible problems. And one of the big things that is popping is that with audit logs and proofing, and Claude has already showed this even this week, they will give you pure records and cues and source data, just like when you do a search in Claude or ChatGPT now that says, this is where this data came from. You can trace this data. We'll show you our work. And it has to be like that across every part of your organization. If you lose that proof, you have no ability to trust your intelligence layer. So it is incredibly important that you can do that. Now, when we do bring this intelligence layer more to the forefront, we really want to think about all of the capabilities that are happening between those many brains, many agents, and being able to understand that your inventory of knowledge, again, knowledge feeds the intelligence layer that your teams are going to be using. That has to be integration friendly. And if you don't have awareness of what a skills.md inventory slash folder structure is, became very popular in Anthropic. So, and I'm throwing a lot of Anthropic stuff out there. You can tell like I love that vendor, especially what they're doing this week. Skills.md, MD is basically a markdown file, but it can also be interacted with other vendors like ChatGPT and JSON type of interaction. Again, that's more for the techie folks, but for the big picture, it helps you create skills based on actual knowledge and business cases. So when you think about it, you have thinking tools, you have doing tools, which again are the agent, and you have auditing tools, but it all comes out of saying, I need this intelligence layer to do what my business needs to have done. And that really comes out of, the thought process of the organizational mind, how I can make decisions, and what are some of the roles that I can use to coordinate and orchestrate these agents. And so this is what I wanted to get you guys to really quickly is the thinking architecture is a representation of what you can call a council of agents, a council of experts, your digital or synthetic board. A lot of you've already created this, and it's kind of started with GPTs when you could give a GPT a lot of information and then create that knowledge. Now you had this amazing, you had your CPA, you had your attorney, you had your board of directors. That was all virtual. We can all do that right now. But the real critical aspect is now that you can give all of the, rather than creating separate GPTs, you can actually create a skills data, basically a database, and integrate that with your agent architecture, connect it to the actual intelligence layer, and then you don't have to keep recreating that for everybody. It's something that you can share across your whole organization one time. And that is the real piece. So holistic systems with all the oversight, all of the asset management, everything that you need to be able to use. Now, the one other aspect, as I mentioned earlier, is this is a very harmonious type of decision-making process when you start orchestrating and building these agents across your whole organization with access to skills centralized and access to the intelligence layer, which can include all of your documents, all of your like meeting recordings and transcripts, all of your financial data, all permission controlled, again, where you can access it. But you have to be able to think about it like it is an orchestration. Think about you're walking into a concert hall and you have to start looking at these layers in that type of analogy. Memory and action has long-term memory, has workflows, has the agents. These are all the practices, the arrangements, the actual musicians and instruments. That is a building block of being able to make this happen. But then you also need the governance, which has a conductor involved, right? We all need a conductor that is applying rules, telling people what to do. You give them sheet music, which can be the playbooks, which is a part of the skills architecture. You give them an access layer, which is the stage entrance, so that they know where to go and how to enter and exit. And you have finally the flow and enablement, which is how work is actually getting done. So if you are pulling a digital assistant from your CPA to be able to move the tempo, you need velocity, you need queuing from a stage manager. You're on, you're off, and you need to be able to have that actual rules, which again is the MCP layer. We haven't dug deep into that, but that is your central permissions layer that you need to have happen. And an MCP layer can also be your access to that skills.md file. So this is a really nice slide as well that you look at harmonizing everything between the governance side, bringing that through to your memory layer, and then everything is going to filter through that MCP layer. Again, MCP, Model Context Protocol, was developed by Anthropic so that they could initially connect their systems to other systems in a secure manner, mostly making it a deeper layer of API integration. But now it's evolved into full servers that can host your skills architecture and use it for coding and building agents across everything. And so it does have governance. And in RSA just a couple of weeks ago, they did have a big talk about all of the pieces that you can use to govern an MCP server properly. So we're getting down to the last couple of minutes. I just want to really thank you all for joining, but this is going to be a really other final piece, is that you will have the digital equivalents to employees at some point. And it's tough to think about, but you do have a digital worker and you're going to have a digital workforce. Maybe not that billion-dollar company that has, one human employee and everybody else is digital. Although, there's a couple companies that say they've done that, but again, dubious right now, but definitely in the future, it's coming. Robotics and digital workers working together is coming really soon. And you're going to need to be able to have that communication layer with the education and automation, as well as all the policies and procedures documented. But this synthetic layer of organization is going to hold all of those assets. Again, access to all of your documents, data, knowledge, everything is going to come together so that you really do have it. And that skills.md is going to be a big part of the next week. And thanks, Dan. There's going to be a great update next month. Date is should be coming out really soon from Scott on building your superpower skills. And you'll see a theme here that each superpower can be your actual skill builder and executor, implementer, and help improve. So these are also self-healing skills. They can be applied to one agent or multiple agents. There's definitely governance. So make sure that you are on our list so that you get the next update. It's going to be incredible. It's going to be a really beautiful deck, as you can see. And that, I believe, yep, this is the next one. It's titled Invisible Superpowers, Organizational Value in the AI Era. So if you don't have a full awareness on how to orchestrate that next layer, especially on the skills folder, please sign up for our updates. You're going to get it out. And we'd like to finish with one final quote. And it's a really great one that really resonates with everybody here at FPOV, that there are many who want to ride the train, but few willing to lay track. And that is the important aspect. We are all on a journey together. We are all going towards that orchestration of the intelligence layer. And every business that I work with is focused now on building this intelligence layer and getting on this roadmap. And again, just a reminder, if you need help with any of this stuff, reach out to FPOV. Our sales team is excellent to work with. We can help you gain that extra piece of information to get there, because everybody needs to be focused on this. Thanks again for everybody. This was excellent. I wanted to want to be close as Scott as possible to hitting the time, and I think we did. We have 1 minute to go. I really appreciate your guys' feedback and chat, and let me know if you do have any questions. You can reach out. We will be monitoring the chat as you have any other questions, but everybody have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Easy for me to say, and I will sign off. Thank you so much, everybody.